Okay, the quality indicators, which is the view you see in front of you right now, is where you really can feel free to make some slight changes if you feel you are still getting too many alerts or the quality of the alerts is not to your liking. Okay, again, with the overall idea of casting a wide but accurate net, making the initial changes to customize AutoChartist to only search for those symbols and those time frames that you trade should dramatically decrease the number of alerts you're getting and increase the reflection of what you would be doing had you been doing this whole process of finding chart patterns manually. So the quality tab, as you can see down here, includes the minimum clarity, minimum uniformity, initial trend, breakout strength, volume increase, and overall quality. The three quality indicators, clarity, uniformity, and initial trend. Let's define those quickly here. Clarity is a reflection of the price action that formed the pattern. So if price action is rather wild, if it's rather erratic, okay, the clarity will be considered low. When there's good, clean price action, of course, this is an aesthetic reading to a certain degree. Sometimes we as traders know it looks good. AutoChartist is able to take that aesthetic reading and actually give it more of an objective measurement. When we see good, clean price action, the minimum clarity would be considered high. Now, why is clarity so important? Well, consider that for most chart patterns, the breakout or the breakdown or the reliance on support or resistance holding is key to executing a trade based upon the support and resistance that the chart patterns offer. And if price action is erratic, it's much more difficult to trust that prices will find support at an uptrend line or find resistance at a downtrend line or whatever the situation might be. So the higher the clarity, the easier it is to trust the price action as it moves around the support and resistance of the pattern. Not to mention the pattern would simply have a better aesthetic appeal. Uniformity has to do with the touch points. So if I have, you need at least 2 touch points to create any kind of trend line or horizontal support and resistance. So if you have good uniformity, that means that the trend lines are basically created by touch points that are spread evenly throughout the life of the pattern. In other words, they're not all congregated up towards one side of the pattern. They're evenly spread out as these 2 diagrams contrast. Okay, there's good, even distances between the touch points that are creating the trend lines. The reason this is important is because if you have a lot of trend lines that are helping form the pattern just accumulated in one area of the pattern, there's a pretty decent likelihood that the relevance of the trend line will be affected. Okay, again, it goes back to aesthetics. So you always want to have as high a minimum clarity and high a minimum uniformity as possible. And these 2 readings are excellent places to incrementally turn up the tolerance for a preference to a better, clearer pattern and to a better, more uniform pattern. So again, do make these changes incrementally, but they will absolutely decrease the number of alerts you get and increase the aesthetic quality of the pattern. Because it's an excellent place to go ahead and make those types of changes. I do not recommend adjusting the minimum trend, the minimum initial trend. And here's why. The initial trend measures the trend that preceded the development of the pattern. Since we have both trending and non-trending patterns that the AutoChartist scans for, trending patterns would be examples like channel down, channel up, falling wedge, rising wedge. Sideways patterns would be examples like triangles, ascending, descending, and the symmetrical here. Even rectangles would be considered non-trending. So since the AutoChartist scans, as you can see, for both trending and non-trending patterns, by turning the initial trend reading to a very high setting, what you're essentially doing is telling the AutoChartist to only look for patterns that have a high preceding trend. Now, this would eliminate a lot of the triangle and rectangle patterns that you could get. Now, in triangle and rectangle pattern situations, you want to see very low initial trend, because you want there to be little trend before the development of the pattern. In other words, a sideways market. When you have a low initial trend, that suggests a sideways market. When you have a high initial trend, that suggests a trending market. And since we are scanning for both trending and non-trending patterns, keeping this reading at the low will give us alerts with both low and high initial trend readings. And then it is going to be our job to see if the higher initial trend readings are accompanying those trending patterns, and whether the lower initial trend readings is accompanying those sideways patterns. So please do not adjust this, because you will essentially be eliminating some of the trending some of the non-trending, if you turn this up, some of the non-trending pattern alerts, as well as some of the non-trending pattern cycles that you could be taking advantage of. Remember, the market moves up, down, and sideways, and there are patterns for moving up, down, and sideways. And this makes sure that we are getting all those characteristics reflected in our chart pattern alerts. So again, the best place to make an adjustment is with the minimum clarity and the minimum uniformity. Please do it incrementally. Volume does not have any bearing on our Forex scans, and minimum breakout strength is actually something I would recommend just go ahead and keep on low, unless you're finding that too many of your emerging patterns, because this only, too many of your complete patterns, this only affects complete patterns. If you find too many of your complete patterns have very bad or weak breakouts. But again, I would recommend keeping this on low, because there are discretionary decisions that you will be making when you are looking at the actual pattern alerts, whether they be complete or emerging.